Welcome. Tonight, we are stepping into a slower world. A quieter one. A world where growing old was not a problem to solve, but a path to walk. Not something to fear, but something to carry with quiet pride. This is not history told through kings and battles. This is history lived through breath and silence, through hands that folded linen, stirred stew, and held memory like a soft flame. So if these slow, gentle stories help you rest, you are welcome to like this video and subscribe. And if you feel like it, let me know in the comments where in the world you are listening from, and what time it is as you drift off. It is always beautiful to know how many of us fall asleep under the same sky. Now dim the lights. Let the fire inside you settle. Let the room grow still. And come with me. Because in the Middle Ages, to grow old was not to vanish. It was to be seen in a new way, quieter, slower, softer. But never less. The first candle is always the quietest. It does not roar like the hearth fire or crackle like dry wood tossed into the flames. It only glows, softly, steadily, as though it knows better than to hurry. You sit close by, your fingers curled around your knees, watching the light push against the edges of the room. You do not rush anymore. There is time now. Time to notice how the wax pools at the base, how the shadows stretch across the floor, how the warmth stays near your skin but never quite reaches your bones. The sun has dropped beyond the thatched roofs, and somewhere in the distance, the village dogs have gone still. A few birds settle into the hedgerows. Evening has come, not just to the sky, but to your life. And oddly, there is peace in that. A kind of hush you never understood when you were younger. Growing old in the Middle Ages does not happen all at once. It comes slowly, like moss gathering at the base of a stone wall. At first, you just take a moment longer to rise in the morning. Then, one winter, your fingers ache more than usual when spinning wool. And before long, someone offers to carry the water jug for you, not because you asked, but because they noticed. That is how you know. Not by the mirror or the aches, but by the way the world begins to shift around you. People speak more gently, as though your ears might break. They talk about you while you are still in the room. It is not cruel. It is just distance. You have become part of the furniture, still here, still known, but no longer central. Still, the fire needs tending. The herbs need drying. And there is a kind of quiet strength in that. Your body speaks now in ways it never did before. It tells you when rain is coming, deep in your knees. It reminds you that ladders are no longer your friend, and that the cold wind has teeth. Your hands, they are no longer quick, but they are wise. They still know how to knead dough, how to bind a wound, how to lift a crying child just enough to quiet them. These hands have pulled turnips from frozen soil. They have wrapped themselves around the arms of dying friends. They have pressed blessings into foreheads and carried grief without complaint. Even when they tremble now, they are not weak. They are just full of memory. The cottage you live in is not large, but it holds the weight of time. The stool by the fire creaks in the same way it did when your husband sat there 20 years ago. The table still leans to the left, just slightly. A crack in the wall lets in the same breeze that once woke your children on spring mornings. There is a spoon carved from cherry wood, smooth now from decades of stirring, that was once shaped by your brother's hand. Every object in the room has a name, a history, a soul. You do not live alone, not really. The past lives with you. Outside, the world is changing. You can hear it in the voices that pass by your window, higher, faster, unfamiliar. Children run past with games you no longer recognize. Their laughter is bright and sharp, like flint striking stone. You watch them sometimes and smile, not with longing, but with something deeper. Gratitude, maybe? Or grace. Because once, you were just like them, loud, certain, full of urgency. Now you prefer the rhythm of stillness. The way time slows when you peel an apple. The way the kettle hisses just before the boil. You speak less now, not because you have less to say, but because others speak so quickly. They fill the space before your thought has formed. So you listen. You nod. You let them believe they are the first to feel what they feel. When the moment is right, you say one thing, a line of wisdom, a piece of truth, and the room falls quiet. They remember then that age does not mean silence. It means knowing when to speak. You used to draw water from the stream every day, balancing the bucket against your hip. That walk carved itself into your bones, up the slope, past the crooked tree, over the stones slick with moss. You do not make that journey now. Your knees protest before you reach the door. But you still remember the path in your sleep. You dream of your bare feet in the mud. And when someone else brings you water, you whisper a thank you that carries years behind it. Because you know what it means to carry, to gather, to provide. There is a stool in the corner where you often sit at dusk. When you settle into it, something in the house settles with you. Even the children, if they are nearby, sense it. You begin to speak, not loudly, not as a teacher, just a soft string of words, memories wrapped in wool. You tell them about the time the river froze solid. About how their father looked when he was born. About a song your grandmother sang that no one sings anymore. You do not embellish. You do not need to. The truth is enough. And for a while, they stop what they are doing and just listen. In that moment you are not old. You are the keeper of time. The bell in the village tolls just as the light begins to fade. A long, deep sound that echoes through the walls like breath. You do not look out the window. You know that sound too well. It is the end of day. The end of chores. The beginning of silence. You close your eyes and let it pass through you. Not as a warning. As a blessing. You survived another day. You saw it to its end. Supper is simple now. A slice of bread, a bit of onion, maybe some broth if the pot is full. You eat slowly, not because of your teeth, but because there is no reason to hurry. The food is warm. The bowl fits your hand. You chew thoughtfully and watch the firelight bounce against the stone. The world outside has gone dark, but in here, the glow is steady. The silence after supper is your favorite part of the day. No demands. No footsteps. Just the soft crackle of the fire and the ticking of your thoughts. You often sit with your eyes half closed, not quite asleep, not quite awake, drifting somewhere between memory and rest. Sometimes you hear voices of the past, a child's giggle, a mother's warning, a song you have not heard in years. They come and go like wind under the door. You no longer fear the dark. You used to, when you were young, afraid of spirits, of thieves, of death. But now the dark feels kind. It does not rush you. It wraps around you like wool. The kind of darkness that does not hide danger, but holds stillness. You light one more candle and let the shadows flicker across the ceiling, dancing in slow rhythm with your breath. Your joints ache when you move. Your legs complain when you rise. But your mind is still your own, sharp in quiet moments. You can still remember the year the crops failed. The scent of wet soil when you planted them again. The color of your husband's coat before it faded with sun and wear. You carry all these things, not as burdens but as proof. You have lived. You have mattered. Sometimes the young forget that. They see gray hair and hear slow words and think the soul has dulled. But inside you still feel that girl who once ran barefoot through the fields, chasing chickens and picking flowers. That girl has not gone. She has just moved deeper. She watches the world through your eyes now, wiser, but still full of wonder. Your faith has changed over time. It is no longer fire and thunder, no longer the fear of hell or hope of miracles. It is quieter now, a candle flame instead of a sunrise. You pray less with words, more with actions. The way you fold a blanket, the way you bless a child's forehead, the way you notice the stars. You trust that the divine knows your heart, even when your voice is silent. The seasons pass more quickly now. You feel it in the way spring turns to summer before you have finished planting herbs. In the way winter arrives before you have burned the last of the wood. Time runs faster when there is less of it ahead. But you are not racing. You are watching. You are savoring. You are letting the world move as it will. There is comfort in small things. The feel of linen against your skin. The way soup tastes better on the second day. The sound of rain tapping gently against the roof. These are not riches. But they are treasures, all the same. You have learned how to see them. How to let them fill the empty spaces without asking for more. When you lie down to sleep, you do not count worries. You count blessings. Not because life was easy, it was not, but because you are still here. You remember those who are not. And for them, you breathe a little slower, a little deeper. a little more grateful. And as the last candle burns low, you close your eyes. Not with fear, but with peace. Because you have known love. You have known labor. You have known laughter and loss and the long, quiet road in between. You have lived. And in this flickering moment between night and morning, that is enough. There is no precise moment when time begins to settle into your bones, only a slow recognition, like realizing the bread has grown stale after the first bite. You notice it in small things. The way your back feels after standing at the basin too long. How your fingers fumble slightly when tying string. The things you once did without thought now ask for care. But you do not resent it. Not truly. Aging is not punishment. It is proof that you have stayed long enough to wear down. The walls of your house have cracks too, and you love them for it. Why not your body? Once your reflection surprised you, a stranger in your own face. Now, it greets you with familiarity. The silver hair, the softened jaw, the lines beside your eyes, they have become companions, not intruders. They tell your story without sound. A young girl still lives beneath them, but she does not need to be seen. She speaks in your movements, in the way you fold a cloth or stir a pot or tilt your head to listen. Her presence is quieter now, but no less real. You do not mourn who you were. You carry her gently. Your steps are slower, but your awareness is sharper. You notice things others do not. The way the wind shifts before a storm. The change in a neighbor's voice when something is wrong. You have lived through too many seasons not to recognize signs. The body may falter, but the soul becomes attentive. It leans into silence. It learns to see what does not shout. When you were young, you rushed toward everything, toward love, toward answers, toward the next day. Now you understand that some things come only when waited for. You rise with the sun not to chase it, but to greet it. There is nothing left to prove. No one is asking for your speed. You are allowed to move like the earth, slowly, steadily, faithfully. Pain becomes part of the fabric of your life. Not dramatic pain, not always. Just a dull hum beneath everything. Your knees complain, your shoulders resist, your hips tighten when the weather turns. But you learn how to move with it. You do not fight the ache. You acknowledge it, nod to it, and continue. Like walking into a strong wind, you brace, but you do not stop. There are tasks you no longer do. The chopping of wood, the hauling of sacks, the climbing of ladders. At first, it stings, handing over what once belonged to your hands. But then you realize, you have earned rest. You have lifted enough. Your worth does not disappear with your strength. It changes shape. You become a teacher, a watcher, a quiet support. That is still work. That is still contribution. Your memory plays tricks, but it is not unkind. Sometimes it withholds names, replaces days, jumbles the order of things. But it also gifts you with sudden floods of clarity, a scent that brings back a feast day, a texture that reminds you of a newborn skin, a sound that delivers a moment you thought long gone. Memory becomes less like a book and more like a song. You do not recall every lyric, but the melody never leaves you. You remember people more than events. The face of a friend who made you laugh so hard your belly ached. The voice of the midwife who whispered prayers during labor. The hands of your mother, warm but sure. You do not need the details to hold them close. Their essence remains. You speak to them sometimes in your mind, not aloud, not to disturb the room, but softly, just enough to feel their presence. Seasons teach you how to age. Spring shows you that new life comes even after the earth has frozen. Summer reminds you of joy, of abundance, of firelight and laughter. Autumn is the gentle turning, the letting go of leaves that no longer serve. And winter teaches rest. It teaches stillness. It shows you that silence is not empty. It is full of preparation. The people around you begin to grow younger. Or perhaps you have simply stayed still long enough to watch generations stack themselves like blankets on a shelf. Children grow, their voices deepen, their faces stretch into someone new. And yet, somehow, you remain, a fixed star they circle, even if they do not always look up to see you shining. You do not ask to be admired. You only ask not to be forgotten. You have seen the same road pass through many feet. Farmers, travelers, soldiers, beggars. The road remembers every pair of boots, every wooden cart, every drop of blood or grain spilled upon it. You feel a kinship with the road. You have carried many things. You have weathered storms. And still you remain? Sleep changes. It comes in patches, like sunlight to leaves. You wake more often, not always from dreams, but from the quiet itself. You lie still and listen, to your breath, to the creak of beams, to the faint howl of wind outside. The darkness no longer frightens you. It feels like a place you have always known, like the inside of your own thoughts. You do not measure your value in what you produce anymore. Not in how many loaves you bake, or how many buckets you carry. You measure it in presence. In how you listen. In the way a child leans into you without question. In how someone says your name and waits for your answer. That is a new kind of strength. A strength that does not lift, but holds. You find beauty in strange places. The way steam curls from a pot, the rhythm of a broom across the floor, the texture of cracked earth in the garden. These are not the wonders of youth. They are the wonders of knowing how to see, of standing still long enough to notice. Laughter becomes richer. Not because you laugh more often, but because you laugh with your whole chest now. You laugh from deep memory, from the absurdity of survival, from the strange joy of still being here. It is a quiet kind of rebellion, to find joy, still, after everything. You sometimes wonder what your younger self would think if she saw you now. Would she be afraid of the wrinkles, the slowness, the gray? Or would she be proud? Would she see the strength in staying? You like to think she would sit beside you, hold your hand, and say nothing. Because some things do not need explaining. They just need presence. There is grief in aging, that cannot be denied. You carry losses like stones in your pockets. Names you no longer speak aloud, hands you can no longer hold. But there is also clarity. The kind that only time can give. You know now which words matter. Which silences speak loudest. Which people are worth the remaining hours. You still make plans, even if they are small. Drying herbs next week. Mending that shawl before the frost comes. Baking something special if your cousin visits. The plans are not grand, but they are yours. They remind you that you are still moving forward. Even if the steps are slower. You end each day with ritual, folding the cloth, banking the fire, whispering a name or a prayer or both. These motions hold you. They give shape to time. They say, I was here. I tended this. I mattered. And in the hush that follows, you rest. Aging is a language, and the body becomes its storyteller. Not through words, but through sensation. The ache in your shoulder that comes with the morning. The stiffness that lingers in your fingers after a cool evening. The heaviness behind your eyes when the candle burns low. It is not pain, exactly. It is more like a quiet presence. Like a familiar animal curled at your feet, always there, always watching. You do not fight it. You make room for it. Your skin has changed. What was once tight and flush now folds gently, like linen softened by years of washing. Your hands are a map, traced by creases, scarred by labor, darkened by sun and time. When you touch your face, it feels both familiar and distant, as though you are holding the face of your mother, or the memory of someone you once were. You are not ashamed of the lines. Each one was earned. They speak of grief and laughter, of sleepless nights and long summers, of loss and devotion and everything in between. Your spine bends slightly now. Not from shame, not from defeat, but from decades of lifting others. You carried children, carried firewood, carried baskets filled with cloth and roots and bread. You bowed under the weight of labor and love. The curve in your back is a reflection of that long service. And though your posture has changed, your dignity has not. You walk a little slower, but you walk with memory in your step. There is a tenderness in the way you move. Each gesture has become more deliberate, more mindful. The way you lace your shoes, the way you set down a cup, the way you press your palm against the wall as you rise. You do not rush anymore. There is no reason to. You have learned that haste is not a virtue. It is a habit of the young, and the young have time to spare. You do not. There are mornings when your body surprises you, not with pain, but with strength. You lift a kettle without thinking. You climb 2 steps without pause. And in those moments you smile to yourself. Because something deep within you still rises. Still remembers how to stretch, how to steady, how to lift the day into your arms and carry it. Your voice has lowered with age. It no longer rings across fields or commands attention at the table. It hums now, quiet, steady, sure. When you speak, others must lean in. And in that leaning, they listen more carefully. The body may fade, but the voice, when it chooses to rise, still holds power. You have known childbirth, or cared for those who did. You have washed the wounds of labor, held trembling hands through contractions, buried losses in silence. Your body, or the bodies around you, have passed through that ancient gate again and again. The wisdom is not in books. It lives in your hips, your hands, your breath. Even now, when the birthing years are long behind, your body remembers how to comfort, how to steady, how to endure. You have known desire too, in your youth perhaps, or in a long married comfort. Your body once burned with it, and now it carries its echo. Not with longing, but with tenderness. You remember the warmth of another body beside you in winter, the shared breath, the whispered prayers. You remember the closeness. And though your bed is often quiet now, the memory is not sorrowful. It is soft. Like wool against the cheek. Your eyes have changed. The world looks different through them, blurred at the edges, brighter in some places, dimmer in others. But you see more than you used to. You see the way someone's shoulders sag when they are tired. You see hesitation in a glance, worry in a smile. You read people like you once read scripture. Carefully. Lovingly. As though they might vanish if not held gently. You have lost teeth. Some were taken in pain, others simply fell away. You have adjusted. You cut bread thinner. You chew slower. You savor more. The body teaches patience, especially in its limitations. What once annoyed you now instructs you. Slowness reveals flavor. Stillness reveals depth. Your ears no longer catch every word. You miss parts of conversations. But you hear other things now. The shift in tone. The pause before someone confesses something hard. The tremble in a voice trying not to cry. You hear the unspoken. The music beneath the words. And sometimes, that is more important than the words themselves. Your legs are not what they were. There are days when stairs feel cruel. But they have carried you far, across fields, through markets, into churches, out of danger. They bore you through labor, through loss, through celebration. You place your hand on them sometimes and whisper thanks, like a blessing. You still walk. You still move forward. That is enough. Scars speak their own language. There is one beneath your collarbone, from when you fell into a well as a girl. Another on your thigh, where a pig bit you in spring. A small one on your hand from a candle that tipped too far. These marks do not define you. But they remind you. You survived. Again and again. Your body tells the story even when your mouth does not. Your breath is different. It comes slower, deeper, sometimes interrupted by coughing or sighs. But you have learned to listen to it. To feel its rhythm. To know when you are calm and when you are not. Breath is the oldest teacher. It tells you when to stop, when to wait, when to speak. You trust it now more than ever. Your stomach has become sensitive. Certain foods that once brought joy now bring discomfort. You adapt. You learn what soothes, what nourishes, what feels kind. You cook not only to eat, but to care. To comfort your body as you would comfort a child. With thoughtfulness. With mercy. You feel the seasons differently in your skin. The chill of autumn arrives early in your joints. The heat of summer lingers longer on your neck. You are attuned to change. You feel the world shift not only in trees and skies, but in your very bones. Your body is no longer separate from nature. It has become nature. Sleep visits you in new ways. Not in long stretches, but in waves. You wake often. Sometimes to a noise. Sometimes to silence. You lie there in the dark and listen to your breath, to the ticking of your own heart. You are not afraid. Sleep will return. You have learned to welcome it when it comes and forgive it when it does not. Your body does not serve others the way it used to. You are no longer the first to rise, the last to sleep. But it still serves you, faithfully, stubbornly, lovingly. It holds you up. It carries you through. And for that you are grateful. Not because it is perfect, but because it remains. You wrap yourself in wool, in linen, in old shawls worn soft by years. You do not dress to impress. You dress to feel whole, to feel comforted, to feel like yourself. The textures matter. The weight of fabric. The scent of soap. These small things, once unnoticed, now hold great meaning. You clothe yourself with care, not because others are watching, but because you are. And as the candle burns low again, and your body leans into the softness of night, you whisper something to it, not aloud, not in words, but in the way your breath slows, in the way your shoulders drop. You tell your body thank you. For staying. For bearing you. For being the home you have always lived in. In the early years, your footsteps were part of the rhythm of the village. People called your name as you passed by. They asked for your hands, your advice, your bread, your help. There was always something to be done, and always someone needing you. You belonged to the daily motion, to the gathering at wells, the whispering over fences, the rush of shared burdens. But slowly, without anyone meaning to, the rhythm began to change. Your steps grew quieter. Your name was spoken less. You became a presence more often than a participant. The village itself has not forgotten you. It still nods to you as you sit near the hearth or sweep the step in the mornings. But the nods are different now, more polite than personal, more respectful than familiar. The children who once ran to you with scraped knees now pass by with only a glance. Their mothers are busy, as you once were. You understand. You do not hold it against them. Still, there is an ache in the space where your laughter used to live among them. People no longer ask what you think right away. They speak among themselves, solve things quickly, fill the silence before you have the chance. You are not silenced, not exactly, but gently left out of the rush. You do not resent it. You know the urgency of youth, how it pulls people forward. You were pulled that way once, too. But sometimes, you wish they would remember that slow voices often hold the deepest truths. There was a time when you hosted gatherings, arranged the platters, stirred the stew, set the tone. Now you sit closer to the wall, holding a warm cup and smiling at the noise. It is not your voice that leads the room anymore. It is your silence, calm, attentive, steady. And perhaps that is its own kind of leadership, one that does not shout, but still shapes the air. When someone is born, you are invited to see the child, but not to hold it. When someone dies, they ask if you remember their mother, not if you will speak at the burial. You are included, but from a distance. It is not cruelty. It is transition. You are the fading edge of the tapestry, still beautiful, but no longer at the center of the pattern. You have noticed that your house is quieter, but the world outside is louder. More voices. More footsteps. More urgency. People pass your window with heads bent forward, arms full of wood or cloth or bread, always in motion. And you, with your slower pace, find yourself watching more than walking. Observing more than speaking. It is a quieter life, but not an empty one. There are still those who seek you. A young girl who asks how to dry lavender. A cousin who wants the recipe for winter broth. A boy who sits near your stool without speaking, just to be near the safety of your quiet. These moments are not loud, but they are precious. They remind you that even in stillness, you are needed. You used to be the first to hear news, before church bells rang, before messengers rode in. Now you hear things second, or third, or not at all. You piece stories together from passing phrases, from glances exchanged between others. But you do not chase after information. You have learned that what matters will find you, and what does not can pass by. The market feels faster now. The shouts, the bartering, the sharp edges of conversation, all of it moves just beyond your reach. You still go sometimes, for apples or thread or oil. But more often, someone brings things to you. A daughter, a neighbor, a friend. You miss the chaos, but not enough to return to its center. You are content to live in the edge light, where things are simpler. You remember when your words could calm an argument, or end one. When people turned to you not because you were loud, but because you were trusted. That trust has not disappeared. It has only quieted. Now when you speak, people pause. Not because they expect brilliance, but because they remember you as someone who has seen storms and not been undone by them. There are new traditions now. New songs at weddings. New ways of kneading bread. New tools you do not recognize. You watch them with curiosity, sometimes even wonder. You do not dismiss them. But you feel their strangeness. You feel how the world moves on without asking for permission. And you try, gently, to bless it anyway. You still visit the chapel, though not every week. The stairs are steep, and the walk is long. But when you do go, you sit in the back and close your eyes. You do not pray as much with words anymore. Your prayers are in your breath, your stillness, your presence. The younger ones kneel and rise quickly. You stay seated, your eyes soft, your silence a kind of praise. You have become someone people confide in. Not for advice, always, but for listening. They tell you things they do not tell their friends. Small griefs. Quiet regrets. Questions about how to go on. You hold their words like fragile cloth, not to fix them, but to keep them safe. That is a different kind of help. A different kind of service. The world still comes to your door sometimes. A neighbor needs your knowledge of herbs. A boy has burned his hand. A girl's mother asks you to speak to her gently about womanhood. These moments feel sacred, not because they are loud, but because they are rare. Because they remind you that you are still a thread in the fabric. There are feasts where you are honored, seats pulled close to the fire, extra slices of bread placed quietly before you, your name mentioned with warmth. You do not speak long to the crowd. But when you raise your cup, people smile. They see you. And in that, you feel the weight of your years become light again. Sometimes, in the quiet of late afternoon, you remember the sound of your younger self laughing in the square. Your voice carried then, ringing off stone. You danced, you called out, you threw your head back without care. And now, though your body no longer leaps, the memory of that laughter lives in you. Sometimes it escapes your lips in a low chuckle, just for yourself. You have seen the births and the deaths of your own generation. The circle is smaller now. The ones who understood your jokes without explanation, the ones who carried the same rhythms, they are fewer. And so, you carry them within you. When you speak, their voices echo. When you laugh, their joy rises again. Your role has changed, but it has not vanished. You are no longer the fire at the center of the village. You are the embers at its edge, warm, steady, enduring. People may not gather around you as they once did, but they still feel your heat when they pass by. You are not forgotten. You are folded into the fabric now, woven deep where the threads do not fray. And when night comes, and the door is closed, and the village hum fades, you sit beside the fire and rest your hands on your knees. You do not count how often you were spoken to or how loudly. You count the warmth of glances, the weight of shared silences, the soft hum of a world that still holds you, not as its center, but as its witness. In a time when ink was rare and paper rarer, your memory became the bookshelf. You carried stories, remedies, names, prayers, and instructions, not because you sought to, but because there was no other place for them to live. The knowledge you held was gathered slowly, like rain into a clay pot. A little here, a little there. From your grandmother's voice, your mother's hands, your own long hours by the fire. Over time, the pot filled. And though no one called you a scholar, you became one anyway, in the oldest, truest sense. Your fingers remember how to bind wounds before your tongue remembers the names of the herbs. You know which leaf eases a cough, which bark to boil for aching joints, how to grind, soak, press, and wrap. You do not always know why it works, only that it does. This is knowledge born of repetition, not theory. Of trial, not study. Of watching someone live, or fail to live, and carrying that memory like a warning stitched inside your apron. The young ask questions, but not always when they should. They are bold, eager, proud. They believe knowing comes quickly, like lighting a flame. But you have seen that true knowledge is more like coaxing a fire from wet wood. It takes patience. It takes listening. It takes failing once, twice, maybe 3 times, and still trying again. You teach not by commanding, but by letting them stand beside you and notice. Letting them fail safely. Letting them remember the silence between actions. There is a recipe for winter broth that you learned from a woman long dead, whose name few remember now. She showed you how to stir counterclockwise, how to add rosemary before garlic, how to taste with the tip of your tongue only. You do not think of this every time you cook. But the memory is there, embedded in your muscles, your breath. This is how knowledge survives, not as a thing you store, but as a way of being that moves through you without effort. When someone is ill, they come to you before the priest. Not because you have miracles, but because you have methods. You know how to cool a fever with cloth soaked in elderflower, how to press thyme into wounds, how to listen to the sound of breath, and know whether it will stay or go. Sometimes you fail. That is part of it. But when you succeed, no one shouts praise. They only breathe easier, and go on living. And you return to your herbs, your fire, your thoughts, quietly. You know stories that no one else remembers. A festival that was once celebrated with green branches and chalk. A woman who baked wedding cakes with coins inside. A man who built a well and vanished into it. These are not in any book. They are in you. And when you speak them, even if only once in a long while, the room softens. People lean in. Because they know what they are hearing is not just entertainment. It is inheritance. There are skills too. How to card wool so it lies flat. How to twist flax with fingers dampened just so. How to shape dough without scales or cups, by feel, by instinct. You could teach these things, but only slowly. Because the learning is not in the steps. It is in the waiting. In doing it wrong, then doing it again. Knowledge has rhythm, and it does not like to be hurried. You understand people in ways the young cannot yet imagine. You know what it means when someone looks away too quickly. When someone avoids the corner of the chapel where they once stood beside the dead. You hear truth in silences. You feel tension in how someone folds a cloth. It is not magic. It is memory. Pattern. Repetition. The quiet study of life over time. Sometimes, when you speak gently in the right moment, someone younger stops and looks at you as though seeing you for the first time. Not as old. Not as slow. But as someone who holds something they do not yet have. And in that gaze, you feel your years take shape, not as loss, but as weight. As something earned. Something needed. In your dreams, you often find yourself teaching. Showing someone how to thread a needle, how to speak to a frightened animal, how to bury the dead with care. Your waking life is quieter than it used to be, but your mind remains busy, arranging, storing, handing out small pieces of what you have gathered. You may not know what will last. But you still give. Because it is not your job to know the future. It is only your task to prepare it. You remember how it felt to not know. How frightening it was to become a mother, a widow, a midwife. How unsure your hands were the first time you touched another's wound. That humility stays with you. It keeps your teaching soft. You do not scold. You do not claim. You offer. Gently. The way it was offered to you. There is a kind of treasure in being asked. Someone knocks. Someone calls through the window. Do you know how to fix this? Have you seen this before? Can you help? You do not always have the answer, but the question itself is a gift. It says, you are still a keeper of knowledge. Still a lantern, even if your flame flickers. There are things you choose not to pass on. Not out of selfishness, but care. Some memories are too heavy. Some lessons must be learned in their own time. You have seen how truth given too early becomes a burden. So you wait. You let the questions come. You trust that what must be known will be known, when the hands and the heart are ready. Sometimes, your own mind surprises you. A name you had not spoken in decades comes back with full clarity. A recipe rises, unasked, as your hands begin to mix. You marvel at how much you still carry. You wonder what else lies folded deep within you, waiting for the right moment to unfold. There is wonder in that. Quiet, patient wonder. The children do not yet understand that you are a library. A walking archive. A body full of secrets that cannot be Googled or found in pages. They take for granted the way your hands work, the way your stories unfold like woven cloth. But someday, perhaps, they will remember. They will repeat your words in their own kitchens, their own sick rooms, their own moments of doubt. And they will not know where the wisdom came from. Only that it was there, when needed. You have learned to say, I do not know, without shame. Because knowledge is not pride. It is hunger. And you are still hungry to learn. To ask. To wonder. When someone teaches you something new, you smile with true joy. Because age has not closed you. It has opened you, like a book worn soft from reading, margins full of notes. There are days when you sit by the window and feel something stir in your chest. Not sadness. Not joy. Just a deep awareness that you are still learning how to be. Still growing into the shape of yourself. And that too is knowledge. The kind that no one teaches. but everyone hopes to reach. You pass on wisdom in small ways, in how you cut a slice of bread, in how you comfort a frightened girl, in how you leave a room just slightly warmer than you found it. You teach without trying. Just by living. Just by staying. Just by being kind. And when night comes, and you blow out the candle, and the world goes dark again, you whisper to yourself, not a lesson, not a prayer, not a memory, but something smaller. A reminder that what you know matters. That what you carry still has weight. And that even in silence, even in stillness, you are still teaching. The fire is not just warmth. It is rhythm. You wake with it, tend it through the day, and let it fall asleep beside you each night. It becomes something sacred, not with incense or ceremony, but with repetition. You have lit that hearth more times than you can count. With dry straw on cold mornings. With damp kindling in bitter wind. You know its moods. You know the way it responds to silence, to breath, to patience. You do not think of it as work anymore. It is your companion. Your measure of time. Your day begins before the light fully arrives. The air is cold and still. Your hands reach for tasks without needing thought, the shawl on the peg, the basin near the door, the bucket waiting in the corner. You light the hearth with practiced care. The first flame is always quiet. You speak to it without speaking. You nod. You wait. When it catches, you feel your body settle. The fire is your first anchor. It tells you the world is beginning again. There is a cloth you fold each morning. Not because it needs folding, but because that is how your mother did it. It sits on the table beneath the wooden spoon, stained at the edge, soft from years of washing. When your hand smooths it, something in your chest also smooths. You do not speak of this. No one asks? But you feel it each day. That tiny act? That quiet order? That secret comfort? You tend to things in circles now. Not lists. Not clocks. You sweep in spirals. You stir in figure eights. You walk the room in loops. There is peace in the repetition. The same motion, again and again. Not because nothing changes, but because everything does. And these small rituals keep you steady while the world shifts around you. You speak less during the day, but you hum more. Little melodies from long ago. Nothing loud, nothing fancy. Just the kind of tune that drifts out as you peel a root vegetable or rinse a cloth. Your voice keeps you company. It reminds you that you are here. That you are still part of the sound of the house, even if others do not hear it. You prepare food not by recipe, but by instinct. A pinch here. A handful there. You feel for texture. You smell for readiness. The broth must cloud just slightly. The onions must sweeten before they color. These details cannot be rushed. And they cannot be taught quickly. They are the kind of wisdom only repetition reveals. The spoon you use has a crack in the handle. You could replace it, but you never have. It fits your hand. It knows your grip. You turn it a certain way when stirring. Tilt the bowl at a precise angle. These are not rules you learn from anyone. They came from doing. From listening. From being still enough to notice what worked and what did not. Washing is also a kind of prayer. Not loud. Not formal. Just the steady rinsing of cloth, the wringing of sleeves, the pressing of linen to stone. You have learned that cleaning is not about perfection. It is about care. It is about showing respect to the things that serve you. The towel, the bowl, the floor beneath your feet. You touch them with thanks. There is a broom you made from twigs 3 winters ago. Its bristles have worn down, but you keep it anyway. It makes a softer sound now, more whisper than sweep. Each morning, you clear the hearth, not just for ash, but for the feeling of beginning. Clean space. Quiet floor. A room ready to hold whatever the day brings. You pause often now. Not because you are tired, though you are, but because you have learned the value of stillness. The pause between stirring and serving. Between folding and tucking. Between finishing one task and beginning another. In those pauses, the house speaks to you. The crackle of fire. The creak of a board. The way the light changes on the wall. You talk to the things in your home. Not out loud, always, but inside your chest. You thank the knife that still slices clean. You nod to the kettle. You press your fingers into the table as though it might remember every meal shared across it. These objects have been with you longer than some people. They have witnessed your life in its quiet, daily truth. There are no holidays in the way the young imagine them. No grand feasts. No new garlands. But you have your own markers. The first day you pick nettles. The last night you use the heavy quilt. The morning you find frost on the outer sill. These become your calendar. Gentle, unnoticed by most, but deeply felt by you. Sometimes someone visits. A neighbor. A cousin. They sit, they speak, they rise, they leave. But after they go, you do the same thing you always do: wash the cup, fold the cloth, wipe the seat. The ritual is not about erasing them. It is about blessing the space they touched. It is about keeping the circle intact. You do not keep time by bells anymore. Not exactly. You keep it by light. By the way the shadow falls across the wall at midday. By the cool that creeps in after second meal. By the silence that settles when the animals bed down. These rhythms live inside your skin now. They are more honest than any clock. You wear the same apron each day. It is patched and stained. It wraps around your middle like a memory. You do not wash it too often. You like the way it smells, like smoke, and onion, and old soap. When you tie it on, you feel like yourself. Not old. Not forgotten. Just complete. When you sweep beneath the bench, you find crumbs, threads, the corner of a leaf. You do not scold. You smile. These are signs of life. Proof that the world still moves through your home. That people came. That someone laughed. That bread was broken here. The evening brings its own rituals. Dousing the coals. Folding the shawl. Placing the spoon just so. You light the candle not because you need the flame, but because you like the way it settles your mind. The way it flickers like breath. The way it reminds you that even in darkness, there is steadiness. You do not speak of these habits to others. They would not understand. They would call them boring. Or unnecessary. But to you, they are sacred. Not in the way of churches, but in the way of survival. The way of grace. The way of saying, each day, I am still here. I am still keeping this little world in order. And as the house settles for the night, and the last light fades, you place your hands in your lap, and you do nothing. You just sit. Breathe. Listen. That too is a ritual. The quiet at the end of the pattern. The space where everything can rest. There was a time when every decision ran through you. What to cook. When to rise. How much wool to card. Who would visit and when. Your hands shaped the rhythm of the house. Your voice guided its pace. You were not a tyrant, only a steady anchor. People looked to you for what came next. And now, without cruelty, they do not. It starts subtly. A basket lifted from your arms without asking. A decision made in the corner while you are stirring soup. Someone else answering the knock at the door. You are not dismissed. Not pushed aside. But you are bypassed. You feel it in your spine before your mind catches up. The sense that your place in the pattern has shifted, just a little, just enough. You do not protest. Not because you agree, always, but because you remember how it felt to be young, to want the wheel in your own hands, to believe you saw more clearly than your mother did. And maybe you did sometimes. Maybe they do now. So you step back. Not with bitterness, but with care. There is wisdom in knowing when to release the reins. Your children speak with certainty now. They set the rules for their children. They measure the salt their own way. They pray in a different rhythm, call on saints you never learned. You watch them, and in flashes you see yourself, not as you are, but as you were. The tilt of a head. The shape of a sentence. You hear echoes of your own voice in theirs. And sometimes that hurts. There are moments when their choices confuse you. They let the bread cool uncovered. They sweep the floor after sundown. They dismiss an old remedy you used for years. You want to say something, but you swallow it. Because what matters more than being right is staying close. And correction, at your age, can feel like distance. So you hold your tongue, even as your heart itches to speak. You become the watcher instead of the doer. You sit while the meat is carved. You listen as the children make plans. You nod as they recount a problem and its solution before you have offered a word. And it is strange, this silence. this stepping back. But also peaceful, at times. The weight you carried for decades now rests on other shoulders. There is a kind of grief in no longer being needed, or being needed differently. Not for your strength, but for your presence. Not for your skill, but for your memory. They call you when they want to know how someone died, not how to stop a fever. They ask what a name meant, not how to fix a torn seam. You are still useful, but in a softer way. In a way that floats, rather than holds. You wonder sometimes how your own mother felt when you began taking over the washing, the spinning, the counting of coins. You did not ask her. You did not see the shift. You simply stepped forward, as your children now have. And so you forgive them. Quietly. Without them knowing they needed forgiveness at all. There are still times when they seek you, when a child is sick, or a calf is born too early, or someone wakes from a dream they cannot name. In those moments, your presence becomes steadying again. Your hands become trusted. They turn to you not because you are in charge, but because you are calm. Because you do not flinch. And yet there are days when you ache for your old voice, the voice that once filled the room. The voice that answered before questions fully formed. Now, that voice speaks only when asked. And you are learning that restraint is a kind of power too. A kind of grace. You are no longer the center, but you are still a root. You teach without teaching now. You fold towels slowly, hoping someone watches. You choose herbs carefully, hoping someone asks why. You live the lesson instead of giving it. It is quieter, but perhaps more lasting. Because what people see done in silence, they remember in their bones. The youngest ones still cling to you. They crawl into your lap. They fall asleep on your shoulder. They do not care that you no longer run. They care only that you are soft, warm, still. They bring you stones, drawings, stories with no end. In them, you are not forgotten. You are magic. You have stopped asking to be included in every task. Not because you have nothing to offer, but because you have learned that peace lies in letting others believe they lead. You smile when they repeat your old wisdom as if they discovered it themselves. You say nothing. That is your gift now, letting others grow without needing to remind them where they came from. The house sounds different. Doors close in new rhythms. Laughter rises from corners you do not enter as often. The kitchen smells of spices you did not buy. This is not your house anymore, not entirely. But you are still its heart, even if the pulse has changed. The walls remember you. The floorboards still greet your step. There are small rebellions still. You refuse to measure with a cup. You fold laundry the old way. You wear the shawl you patched yourself, even if it looks worn. These are not protests. They are declarations of self. Little reminders that you are still here. Still particular. Still you. You speak to your spouse, if they are gone, more often now. Especially when the house is full and you feel a little invisible. You whisper your thoughts aloud when no one is listening. You laugh to yourself at memories no one else would understand. And somehow, that keeps them with you. You do not envy the young. Their lives move fast. Their bodies ache in different ways, from stress, from chasing, from striving. You have traded urgency for presence. It was a good trade. You miss things, yes, but you also see more. You hear the shift in a voice. You feel the weight of an unspoken word. You sit in silence, and the silence speaks back. Sometimes they ask for your blessing. Before a birth. Before a journey. Before a marriage. They bow their heads, and you place your hand on theirs. You say nothing, or you say only a few words. And in that moment you remember who you are. Not the doer. Not the master. But the keeper of meaning. The one who holds the past, so the future can walk forward. And at night, when the house quiets, and you lie still beneath your quilt, you let go of all the moments you were not needed that day. And you hold on to the one or two where you were. That is enough now. That is more than enough. Faith was once fire. Bright, urgent, terrifying. You were young, and the fear of hell burned at your heels. You crossed yourself when lightning cracked, when babies cried too long, when animals died without reason. You memorized prayers before you understood them. You knelt because you were told to kneel. You whispered names of saints like spells, hoping they heard you through the cold stone walls of the chapel. You believed because you were afraid not to. But time does something to belief. It softens it. Not by breaking it, but by wearing away the sharp corners. What was once a roaring fire becomes a steady flame. Faith no longer frightens you. It holds you. It steadies your hands when they shake. It lets you walk into silence without dread. You pray now not to be saved, but to be seen. Not to be spared, but to be remembered. You no longer count sins the way you used to. You do not fear purgatory with the same intensity. Your confessions are quieter. Not because you are more holy, but because you understand more. You know that guilt does not always come from wickedness, and mercy does not always come from priests. You trust that the divine sees more than the law does. You trust that grace is not measured by coin or ritual. You have sat beside too many deathbeds not to believe in something beyond this life. You have heard the final breath leave with a sigh, with a question, with a smile. You have seen eyes stare into corners of the room where no one stands. You do not explain these things. You only witness them. And witnessing becomes its own kind of prayer. Your own death is no longer a shadow you run from. It is a guest you have not yet invited in, but whose presence you acknowledge. You wash your face with that knowledge. You lace your shoes knowing you may someday not need to. This awareness does not darken your life. It deepens it. It makes the soup taste richer, the quilt feel warmer, the child's hand in yours more precious. The chapel is farther now. Some weeks you do not go. The walk is long. The stones are slippery. But you still keep Sabbath in your own way. You light the candle with intention. You hum the hymns you remember. You look at the sky and feel reverence swell in your chest. No bell needed. No walls required. Your faith no longer depends on being seen. You speak to God more freely than you once did. Not always in formal prayer, but in whispers, in sighs, in silence. You speak while peeling apples, while folding sheets, while watching the wind chase leaves across the path. You no longer worry if your prayers are the right ones. You trust that being real is better than being perfect. There are nights when fear still comes. Not of hellfire, but of fading. Of being forgotten. Of leaving no mark. And on those nights, you pray not to saints, but to memory itself. You ask the world to remember you. In a recipe. In a tune. In the softness of a folded blanket. That is enough. That is all most people want in the end. You remember the festivals of your youth. Holy days filled with light and sound, processions through muddy streets, candles held high, chants rising into the rafters. Now those days pass with little fanfare. But inside you, the song still plays. The devotion remains, even without the celebration. Because faith does not need crowds. It only needs breath. You have stopped asking God for things. You do not plead. You do not bargain. You offer. You offer your quiet work. Your folded hands. Your gaze lifted to the sky. And in return, you ask only for peace. For sleep. For enough time to give your love away before the end. You do not fear judgment as you once did. You have judged yourself already, over and over. And you have learned to be gentler. You believe that whatever waits beyond this world is not cruel. You believe it will understand you. That it will see the child you once were, the mother you became, the elder you are now, and call it enough. Dreams are different now. You dream of people who are gone. They do not speak, but they are near. Sitting at the table. Walking beside you in fields. Laughing just out of reach. You wake with tears sometimes. Not from sadness, but from recognition. As if you have already begun your return. The stars have become companions. You look at them often, especially on clear nights when the wind has calmed. You see them not as far-off fires, but as windows. As signals. As reminders that there is more beyond this roof, this road, this moment. You do not need to know where you are going. Only that the path is wide enough. Sometimes you hear the church bell in your dreams. A deep, slow tolling. It does not call you to worship. It does not warn. It simply rings, and you feel yourself walking toward it. Calm. Steady. As though your name were written in its sound. You still keep small talismans. A dried flower from a grave. A scrap of cloth from a child's gown. A saint's medal, worn smooth with touch. These are not superstitions. They are anchors. They remind you that life leaves marks. That love leaves traces. that nothing is fully gone. You do not speak much of death. You do not avoid it either. You talk of gardens, of illnesses, of the seasons. But underneath those words, you are saying something deeper, something everyone understands, even if they pretend not to. That everything ends. That everything changes. That everything matters because of it. When someone you love dies now, you do not panic. You cry, yes. You ache. But you also know what to do. You know how to boil the water, how to wash the body, how to hold space for silence, how to say goodbye with dignity. This, too, is a kind of wisdom, a kind of faith. And when you close your eyes each night, and let the weight of the day fall away, you whisper nothing grand. No final creed. No long petition. Just a breath. A thought. A hope. That you live this day with care. That tomorrow, if it comes, will be welcomed. And if it does not, that is all right too. Illness comes differently with age. Not like a storm, sudden and wild. More like fog, creeping in slowly, quietly, and staying longer than it used to. You wake one morning with a dull ache in your throat, and it lingers through the week. Your knees swell after rain, and the swelling never quite goes down. Your breath shortens walking uphill. You do not panic. You do not complain. You learn to live beside the discomfort, as one might live beside a river that sometimes floods. There are no doctors in the way people now imagine them. No clinics, no remedies guaranteed. There are midwives, herb women, traveling healers, and priests with oils. Most healing is done with what you know and what you have: warm cloth, steeped roots, careful rest, prayers said in quiet corners. When you feel unwell, you do not call for help immediately. You wait. You watch. You know your body well enough to listen. The bed becomes both sanctuary and cage. On good days, you sit by the hearth and stir the pot. On bad days, you lie down with the window cracked, breathing in the smell of earth and wood smoke. You watch the shadows move across the ceiling. You track the passage of time by light and pain. The bed cradles you, but also reminds you of your frailty. You do not curse it. You thank it for holding you. Your family notices the changes, but they speak around them, not through them. You are tired today. Stay inside, the wind is sharp. They do not say, you are weakening. You are slipping. And that is a kindness. Because even when truth is obvious, gentleness makes it bearable. You respond with a smile, a nod, a soft promise that you will rest, and you mean it. Illness does not always announce itself with fever or blood. Sometimes it hides in the joints, in the fatigue, in the fog of memory. You forget names more often now. Misplace things. Walk into a room without reason. There is fear in that, quiet and steady, but also acceptance. You tell yourself, this is what happens. The mind, like the body, weathers. And weathering is not failure. It is just change. You remember caring for others. Your mother's coughing in winter. The child who burned with fever for 3 nights. The man who fell from the roof and never quite healed. You remember the herbs you used, the way your fingers moved without thought. Now, those same hands tremble when lifting a spoon. The memory of your strength does not bring bitterness, only tenderness. Sometimes someone sits by your bed. A daughter. A grandchild. A neighbor bringing broth. They do not say much. They wipe your forehead. Adjust your blanket. They tell you a bit of gossip from the village. Their presence is not loud, but it is healing. You rest better when someone else breathes beside you. The room feels less heavy. When pain sharpens, you do not cry out. You breathe through it. You focus on small things. The pattern in the wood grain, the curl of steam from the broth, the sound of a chicken scratching just outside. These details tether you to the moment. They remind you that you are still here. Still part of the world, even if you are not standing in it. There are days when you improve. When your hands feel steadier, when your legs do not protest as much. You step outside. You feel sun on your back. You breathe deeply, though your lungs resist. And for a moment, you forget the weight of illness. You stir the pot. You braid a child's hair. You laugh. And that laughter feels like spring water. Cold. Pure. Unexpected. But even on the good days, you move carefully. You know now how quickly strength leaves. So you do not race it. You walk slowly. You sit when you need. You do not apologize. You have given your body so many years of service. Now, it deserves your patience. You are learning how to be kind to it, not out of vanity, but gratitude. Prayer changes when you are sick. It becomes simpler. Less about healing, more about peace. You do not beg to be restored to youth. You ask only for comfort, for clarity, for the strength to sit up one more time, for the pain to stay small enough to let you sleep. And when those prayers are answered, even a little, you offer thanks. Quietly. Without fanfare. You keep things near your bed, a handkerchief from your sister, a dried sprig of lavender, a smooth stone someone gave you years ago. These objects hold no magic, but they offer steadiness. Memory. They remind you of who you are when you feel most like a shadow. You touch them when the fever rises. When the night is long. When you need to remember that you are not only this body. Sometimes you wake drenched in sweat. The world swims. You feel unmoored. And in those moments you call on the names that brought you comfort before, your mother's, your God's, your own. You whisper them like anchors. And slowly, the storm inside you calms. You are not healed. But you are present again. The people around you do not speak of death. But it lingers in the room. Not with menace, but with certainty. Like the scent of rain before it falls. You do not fear it the way you once did. You have lived long enough to see that death is not the enemy. Pain is. Loneliness is. But death is a kind of closing. Still, there is joy in small recoveries. The day you can eat an apple again. The first time you braid your own hair after a week of lying still. The sound of your voice when it returns after days of whispering. These are not miracles. They are invitations. To rejoin the world gently. One moment at a time. You have seen people grow angry with illness. Rage against it. Curse it. And you understand. But you have chosen another path. You have chosen to sit beside it like a difficult guest. To offer it a chair, a cup of broth, and ask it to be kind. Sometimes it listens. Sometimes it does not. But you do not raise your voice. You keep your dignity. Your strength now lives in different places. Not in your arms or legs, but in your patience. Your resilience. Your ability to wait out the ache without losing your softness. That, too, is a kind of health. Not perfect. Not whole. But honest. And lived in. And worthy. There will be more days in bed. You know this. The seasons are turning. Your body is slowing. But you also know this. As long as you breathe, as long as your hand can curl around a spoon, as long as your eyes can follow a bird's flight through the window, you are not done. Not yet. And so each morning, if your body allows it, you rise. You stretch. You breathe deep. And you thank whatever force still keeps your feet touching the floor. Because healing does not always mean a cure. Sometimes, healing just means waking up one more time and choosing to try again. There is a moment, each day, when the past returns uninvited. It might come with the scent of ash and lard in the kitchen, or the way the light moves across the wall at noon. You are not thinking about anything in particular when it happens. But suddenly, you are there again, not here, not old, but young, and laughing, and barefoot in the grass. The present does not vanish. It softens. It makes room. Memory does not knock politely. It arrives like smoke, curling under doors, filling the corners of the room, catching you off guard. A spoon left at a certain angle reminds you of your mother. A scrape on your knuckle brings back the barn. A gust of wind through the chimney sounds like the whisper of a voice now long silent. You welcome these ghosts. You have made peace with their presence. They no longer haunt. They accompany. You keep your memories organized, not on shelves, but in your gestures. A folded cloth. A bread recipe passed down without measurements. The way you wrap your shawl twice around your shoulders, just like your grandmother did. These actions are altars. Quiet places where remembrance lives. You do not need photographs or writing. Your body remembers. Your breath remembers. Sometimes you sit with a piece of fabric, or an old comb, or a bead fallen from a broken string, and hold it in your lap for long minutes. You are not thinking, exactly. You are remembering. Not with effort, but with surrender. You let the images come. The sounds. The names. You do not chase them. You receive them like old friends. The kitchen is the strongest altar. It holds echoes in the wood. The way your husband used to shuffle his boots at the threshold. The squeak of the cupboard when your youngest child climbed it for honey. The table still carries the stain from a spilled stew no one cleaned properly. These are not flaws. They are signatures. And every time you light the fire, the past warms its hands beside you. You speak the names of the dead under your breath when the room is quiet. Not always aloud, just enough to keep them awake in your heart. You say them while peeling turnips, while walking to the privy, while folding a shirt that belonged to someone else long ago. The names are prayers now. Not asking for anything. Just saying, I remember. There are songs you cannot sing without crying. Not because they are sad, but because they carry too much. A line hummed in your ear as a child. A verse sung during a burial. A chorus shouted at a harvest feast. Music is where memory sleeps. And when you wake it, it wakes you. Dreams carry you backward more than forward. You see faces you had forgotten. You hear phrases you did not know you still held. Sometimes you wake with a name on your lips and tears in your eyes. You do not chase the dream away. You lie there in the dark and let it settle. It is a kind of visitation. A kind of gift. Your memory does not always obey. It skips over important dates and clings to small, strange things. The smell of boiled onions, the sound of boots in snow, the feel of cold pewter on your tongue. You do not mind. These fragments are enough. They are yours. They carry weight. You no longer tell long stories unless someone asks. You drop bits instead, a sentence here, a memory there. You offer them like breadcrumbs, in case someone wants to follow. Most do not. But some do. And when they lean in, when they ask, "What happened next?" you give them the rest. Gently. Carefully. Like passing fire from one wick to another. You have stopped correcting the memories of others. When someone tells a story wrong, or leaves out a name, or smooths over a sharp edge, you let it pass. Not because truth does not matter, but because you understand now. Memory belongs to the heart as much as the mind. Each person carries their own shape of what happened. You carry yours. There are places in the village that hold you even when you are not there. The bend in the road where your friend broke her ankle. The tree that bloomed early the year your son was born. The stone wall where you first kissed someone whose name no longer stings. The land remembers, too. You feel it when you walk. Objects remember as well. A pot that wobbles. A scarf patched too many times. A comb missing 2 teeth. You do not throw these things away. You mend them. You repurpose them. Because they are more than useful, they are part of your witness. They have lived beside you. There are days when the past feels closer than the present. When the fire crackles just like it did 40 years ago. When the laughter in the next room could belong to children now grown or gone. You do not fight that feeling. You let it wash over you, like warm water. Like light through colored glass. You do not fear forgetting. Not the way you once did. You know now that even if the names fade, the feelings remain. The shapes. The warmth. The ache. The love. These are deeper than words. They do not disappear. They wait. And sometimes they return when you least expect. When you bless your food, you also bless the hands that taught you to make it. When you wrap your shawl, you also wrap the memory of the woman who gave it to you. Every action becomes a link in the chain of before. You live surrounded by the unseen. Children sometimes ask what life was like when you were young. You do not know how to explain it, not fully. It was colder. It was harder. But it was also fuller, in its own way. Every moment mattered more, because there were fewer distractions. Fewer ways to run from pain. Or joy. Or truth. You do not write these things down. You speak them into the fire. Into the bread. Into the lap of the child who falls asleep beside you. That is your record. That is your legacy. Not carved in stone. Not sealed in ink. But breathed into the rhythm of life itself. And at the end of the day, as you sit beside the dimming light and listen to your own breath, you do not need to go looking for the past. It comes to you. Quietly. Gently. As if to say, I am still here. I have not left. I live in your hands, in your voice, in the way you close your eyes, not to forget, but to remember. Winter arrives without asking. You know it is coming long before the first frost. The air begins to bite a little earlier in your bones than in the sky. The ache in your joints becomes your calendar. You feel it in your knees, in your back, in the way you pulled the shawl tighter across your chest. The younger ones notice the cold when the wind howls. You feel it in silence, the kind of silence that settles into the corners of the house and waits. You remember winters when the snow climbed higher than the door. When you had to crack the ice in the basin before washing your face. When the bread froze hard before noon, and your breath curled into clouds even by the hearth. But you also remember laughter in those winters. The huddle of bodies beside the fire. The way even sorrow felt warmer when shared by many. Now, the house is quieter. And the cold feels deeper. There is a difference between being cold and being alone in the cold. In youth, winter is something to be endured, battled, even laughed at. In age, it becomes a question. How much wood is left? How long can I carry water before the bucket slips from my fingers? How often can I rise from bed without falling? You do not speak these questions aloud. But they are there, curled beneath every breath. You prepare slowly. Layering wool upon wool. Hanging herbs above the lintel. Mending the cracks in the shutters with old cloth and patience. You dry apples. You seal jars. You tuck candles into corners. This is not panic. It is ritual. The same way you would prepare for a guest. Winter is coming. You set the table for it. The hearth becomes everything. It is not just warmth, it is safety, memory, companionship. You measure your day and how close you can sit to it. You feel the warmth in your bones as something sacred, not to be taken for granted. You keep the embers alive even when no one else is looking. Because you know that a cold hearth is not just uncomfortable. It is dangerous. Your body moves less in winter. The cold wraps around your limbs and slows your blood. Tasks that once took minutes now take hours. You rise with care. You walk with a hand on the wall. You accept help without argument. Not out of weakness, but wisdom. Winter is not the time for pride. It is the time for gentleness. You sleep more, but not more deeply. The nights are long, and your dreams wander. Sometimes you dream of summer, of heat on your back, of green leaves, of running water. Sometimes you dream of those who are gone, arriving through the snow as if the veil between seasons lets them pass. You wake slowly, blinking into the dim light, unsure what year it is. And for a moment, that unknowing feels peaceful. Food becomes simpler. Root vegetables. Broth. Dry bread softened in water. You eat not for pleasure, but for strength. Each bite is an act of resistance. A way of saying, I am still here. I still rise. I still fill this bowl with my hands. And when your hands tremble, you do not curse them. You thank them for still working. Winter has a sound. The hush of snow. The creak of beams. The wind slipping through tiny cracks and whispering things no one else hears. You listen. Not with fear, but with respect. The cold does not shout. It sings. And you have lived long enough to understand its music. You remember when winter meant festivals, candles lit at dusk, bread shared with neighbors, songs sung through chattering teeth. Now the gatherings are smaller, or you do not go at all. The distance is too far. The air too sharp. But in your room, you hum the songs anyway. You close your eyes and let the rhythm fill the space. You carry the feast in your memory. Sometimes someone brings you something, a handful of walnuts, a bit of cloth, a smile that says, I see you. These small gifts feel like warmth itself. Not because of what they are, but because of what they mean. You are not forgotten. You are still part of the circle, even if you sit at its edge. You watch the children play in the snow. Their joy is sharp, bright, wild. You do not join them. But you watch. You smile. And in that smile is everything, your memory of snowball fights, of slipping on ice, of warming frozen fingers between someone else's hands. You remember how snow once felt on your bare face. And that is enough. There are days when the cold seems endless. When the gray sky presses down on your thoughts. When your hands ache too much to sew, and your eyes blur too quickly to read. On those days, you sit still. You let the blanket wrap you. You breathe in and out. You do not demand cheer. You only ask for quiet endurance. That is the kind of strength winter teaches. You talk to the fire. Not in words, but in glances, in small offerings. A stick placed just so, a sigh as you sit. The fire becomes your friend. It flickers and listens. It answers with crackles. You miss voices sometimes. But the fire speaks in its own language. And that language feels ancient. You think more often of those who died in winter. The ones who did not survive the long dark. The ones whose chairs now sit empty. You light a candle for them. You say their names under your breath. Not as mourning, but as remembering. The way one might greet an old companion through frost-covered glass. The stillness of winter matches your own. You no longer need to be busy to feel alive. You feel life in your breath, in the warmth of a cup in your hands, in the way your body curls into itself like a seed waiting for spring. You understand hibernation now, not as laziness, but as wisdom. A way of conserving what matters. You mark the days by the way light falls through the window. At midwinter, it barely rises. By late winter, it stretches further across the floor. You watch it carefully. You notice. These changes seem small to others, but to you, they are everything. They are signs that the world still turns. That spring will come. You no longer need the world to be loud. You no longer seek the bustle, the feast, the crowd. In winter, your needs become clear: warmth, food, breath, silence, memory. You draw the world small and close. And in that closeness you find peace. And when the night arrives, early, heavy, thick with frost, you tuck yourself beneath the wool blankets, you close your eyes, and you let the darkness hold you like a story you already know. One you have heard before. One that promises, even in the deepest cold, that light always returns. There is a question that comes more often now. Not from others, but from somewhere inside. Was it enough? Not asked in fear, but in wonder. Not in panic, but with curiosity. You do not ask whether you lived perfectly. You know you did not. You ask whether you lived truly. Whether you gave more than you took. Whether your presence left a warmth in the places you touched. You do not count wealth. You have never had much of that. You count the bowls that were passed from hand to hand. The children you held while they cried. The pies you baked for neighbors without being asked. The herbs you picked to soothe someone else's pain. These were not grand gestures. But they were steady. They were given freely. And they added up. In youth, it seemed life would be measured by great deeds. By names remembered in books. By stories sung in feasts. But as the years passed, you saw a different kind of greatness. The greatness of quiet resilience. Of waking each day and tending what needed tending. Of not turning away when grief came. Of staying. That, too, is a kind of heroism. You look back not in years, but in seasons. The harvest that was too wet. The winter that took the oldest sheep. The spring your sister died, and the leaves still came. The summer the well ran dry. These are the beads on the string of your life. Not marked on calendars, but in memory. In the feel of air. In the taste of fear or joy or silence. Some faces have faded. Some names are blurred. But what remains is feeling. The love that lingered after an argument. The pride when a child first walked. The sting of injustice. The softness of forgiveness. These are the threads that wove you. And they still hold. You do not need anyone else to judge your life. You have judged it already, many times, by the light of the hearth, by the curve of your hands, by the way you speak to yourself when the house is still. You know where you failed. You know where you were brave. And you have made peace with both. You were not always kind. You remember sharp words. Doors closed too quickly. But you also remember saying sorry. Bringing warm bread. Holding a hand without asking why. The measure of your life is not perfection, but return, the way you tried again. The way you kept softening, even after being hardened by time. You remember laughter. Great, heaving, body-shaking laughter that left you breathless. It did not come often, but when it did, it stayed. It lives in your ribs. In the corners of your eyes. In the wrinkle near your lip. That laughter was a kind of resistance. Proof that joy survived even when nothing else did. You remember fear, too. Nights you thought the roof might give in. Days when the sickness spread too quickly. Years when the harvest failed. You do not dismiss those fears now. You honor them. They taught you how to be careful. How to hold on. How to find comfort in small things. A boiled potato, a dry bed, a hand beside your own. You wonder what others will say of you when you are gone. You do not need praise. You do not expect songs. You only hope they say, "She was steady. She was present. She made the room warmer when she entered. She helped." That is enough. That would be a life well lived. You have no titles, no lands, no riches. But you have something else. The knowledge that someone sleeps in a blanket you mended. That someone learned a skill from watching your hands. That someone smiles when they taste your soup recipe. These are your legacies. They do not need stone to last. You were part of the village even when the village changed. You knew the names of the old streets. You remembered when the chapel was new. You watched as roofs collapsed and were rebuilt. And all the while you stayed. You bore witness. You became part of the soil beneath the stories. Regret visits you gently now. It no longer shouts. It whispers. And when it comes, you do not turn away. You offer it tea. You sit with it. You ask what it came to teach. And then, when it is ready, you let it go. Like a bird flown in through the window, it rests a while and leaves again. Gratitude, on the other hand, has become your closest companion. You feel it in your bones when you stand and nothing hurts. You feel it in your chest when a child calls your name. You feel it in your breath when the wind is soft. Gratitude arrives even when nothing else does. It asks for nothing but attention. You do not know how many days remain. No one does. But you no longer count downward. You count outward. Each day is not one less. It is one more fire, one more bowl of soup, one more evening light across the floorboards. That shift has changed everything. You speak to God less about heaven and more about now. You ask not for paradise, but for presence. For strength to meet what comes. For grace to leave gently, when it is time. You do not fear what follows. You trust that something awaits, not because you earned it, but because love makes space. You no longer rush. Even when time feels short. You have learned that slowness is not waste. It is reverence. It is the way you make the ordinary sacred. By noticing. By lingering. By saying, "This matters." Even now. You carry no banner. You claim no glory. But in the stillness, in the quiet tasks, in the stories passed through your hands, you have made a life. Not perfect. Not grand. But real. And real is enough. And when the candle burns low, and your breath slows, and the night wraps around you, you close your eyes with peace. Because you know what they do not always say aloud, that you lived. Fully. Honestly. Gently. And that is the truest measure of all. There comes a time when your hands are no longer asked for, but your eyes still are. You are no longer needed to fetch, to lift, to fix. But they still look to you when the child stumbles, when the cloth will not sit straight, when someone says a word they do not understand. And you, without moving, give something. A glance. A nod. The gentle weight of a gaze that has seen enough to steady others. Watching becomes your work. Not the passive kind. Not idleness. The deep kind. The kind that notices what others miss. The way someone fidgets when they are lying. The way a loaf of bread rises differently when the weather shifts. The change in a loved one's face before they even speak. You watch, not because you cannot act, but because you know when not to. You remember when your eyes were always turned forward, toward what needed to be done. When you measured the day by your own footsteps, to the market, to the stream, to the neighbor's house. Now your steps are few. But your reach is longer. With only your eyes, you reach into places no hands can go. You notice sorrow before it speaks. You see joy before it bursts. You sit by the window in the late afternoon, not waiting for anything in particular, just watching. The light moves differently now than it did when you were young. Softer. Slower. As if the sun, too, has aged with you. You watch it stretch across the yard, catch in the threads of laundry, slip along the table's edge. That watching is not empty. It fills you. Children do not understand what you are doing when you sit so still. They think you are tired. Sometimes you are. But often, you are simply gathering, collecting the quiet moments the world spills around you. A bird landing. A pot settling. A baby's laugh 2 houses down. These small things are riches. You store them like coins in the folds of your memory. You remember when you thought action was the only way to matter. When watching felt like absence. But now you know better. You know that being present is not the same as doing. That being near is sometimes the greatest gift. You have learned how to be near without demanding, without interrupting, only offering your presence, like open arms that do not insist on being filled. There are lessons only a watcher can give. Not with words, but with timing. With knowing when to step in and when to stay seated. With knowing when someone needs advice and when they just need to be seen. You are no longer a teacher by instruction. You are a teacher by example, by patience, by restraint, by steadiness. You hear people speak around you as if you are not there. You are not offended. You listen. You learn what they think when they forget you are listening. And sometimes, when the moment is right, you offer one sentence, just one. And it lands like a stone in still water. Because you waited. Because you did not waste your voice on noise. Watching has taught you what matters. Not ambition. Not perfection. But tenderness. The way a child curls into a lap. The way someone stops what they are doing to help another. The soft word offered when no one else would speak. You watch for those things now. You watch, and you feel yourself soften. There are people you watch who will never know it. A neighbor who limps. A boy who walks alone. A girl who sings when she thinks no one hears. You watch them not to judge, not to report, but to care. To hold a small piece of their story in your gaze, so they do not carry it alone. You do not always want to speak. Words feel heavier now. Not harder, just more precious. You weigh them. You decide whether they are needed. And often, they are not. A look can hold more than a sentence. A pause can speak more than a paragraph. Silence, used well, is a language of its own. Sometimes you watch your own hands. How they rest. How they remember what they no longer need to do. You do not mourn what they have lost. You honor what they have done. You let them be still without guilt. You watch the stillness as a kind of beauty, earned, quiet, powerful. You notice the seasons more now than ever. The exact day when the wind changes. The first yellow leaf. The scent of water returning to the soil after snow. The world does not announce its changes. It whispers them. And because you are watching, you hear every word. There is wisdom in sitting still. Not the kind shouted from pulpits or written in books. The quiet kind. The kind that lives in the space between words. In the breath before speaking. In the moment after someone walks away, when their scent still lingers. You sit with that wisdom. You do not try to own it. You only carry it gently. You no longer try to remember everything. You let some details go. You trust that what matters will remain, in your heart, in your hands, in your posture. Memory is not always sharp. But presence is. And you are present now in ways you never were when you rushed. There are times when someone thanks you, and you are surprised. You do not know what you did. You only watched. You only listened. You only sat nearby. But to them, that was enough. To them, that was everything. And you realize, watching is not a small thing. It is a gift. You speak blessings with your eyes now. When a young mother enters the room. When a boy carries wood without being asked. When someone offers you their hand without words. You meet their eyes. You nod. That is your way of saying, I see you. I honor you. Keep going. At the end of the day, you sit quietly and look out at the dusk. You do not replay the day in your mind. You do not list what was done or left undone. You simply watch the light fade. And in that fading you feel complete. Because sometimes the truest measure of a life well lived is not what you did, but what you witnessed. What you saw. What you held in your gaze and let be real. And in that stillness, you become part of the story, not its noise, but its thread. You do not notice it at first, the way the world begins to shrink. It happens slowly, kindly almost. One day you no longer walk to the market. Then a month passes without seeing the far field. Soon, the furthest place you go is the bench beside the fire. And still, you do not feel trapped. You feel contained. As though life, once sprawling and noisy, has now curled itself into something small enough to hold. The people around you change, too. Fewer friends visit. Some have died. Others cannot walk as far. Some are simply caught in the storm of their own lives. Children, hunger, grief. You understand. You do not hold it against them. But you do notice the quiet where voices used to be. The pause in the afternoon that used to be filled with conversation or laughter or shared bread. The room becomes your country. The hearth your sky. The chair your field. You look at the same walls each day and find something new in them, a crack you had not noticed, the way the shadow falls different now that the sun has moved. The world has not disappeared. It has gathered itself close. And you live inside its arms. You once knew the names of every child in the village. Now, when you hear laughter outside the door, the names escape you. You recognize the rhythm of their play, the melody of youth, but the faces blur. You smile anyway. Because the joy is familiar, even if the people are not. The song of life still plays, and that is comfort enough. Your table is not full like it used to be. Where once there were 6 bowls, now there is 1. Sometimes 2, if someone stops by. You do not set out extra anymore. But you still sit at the head, still light the candle, still offer thanks before eating. Ritual does not require company. Only presence. You remember the days of crowding, too many feet in the doorway, too many coats on the peg, too many hands reaching for bread at once. You miss them, sometimes. But you also remember the noise, the exhaustion. Now there is a gentler pace. You eat slowly. You breathe between bites. You taste what once rushed past your tongue. There are hours that pass without a word spoken. Not out of sadness, but stillness. You listen to the fire. To the creak of the beam. To the wind outside. Silence is not empty. It is full of things that used to be drowned out by sound. You hear your own breath. You hear the house settle. You hear time. You begin to speak more with your eyes, your hands, your posture. A nod replaces a sentence. A glance says enough. Words feel heavier now, and you carry them carefully. You speak only when needed. And when you do, people lean in. Because they know, what you say is not said lightly. There is sorrow in watching others go. One by one, the voices you knew become echoes. A friend you once laughed with now buried beneath stone. A sister's chair now gathering dust. You carry their memory gently, like folded linen. You do not cry each day, but you remember. And in remembering, you keep them close. Some mornings you wake and forget, just for a moment, who is no longer there. You reach for a voice. You prepare 2 cups instead of 1. And when the memory returns, you do not push it away. You sit with it. You let it settle beside you like a visitor. Because grief, when held with kindness, becomes a kind of company. There are fewer footsteps in your life now. But the ones that remain matter more. The neighbor who checks in. The child who brings herbs. The priest who stops not to preach, but to sit. These are not grand gestures. They are threads. They hold you. You begin to treasure small arrivals. A new bar of soap. A fresh loaf of bread. The letter someone wrote, even if it only says hello. These things carry weight. Not because of what they are, but because someone remembered. Someone reached out. In a world that is narrowing, even a touch from the outside feels like sunlight. You do not ask for much. You ask for warmth. For softness. For a hand now and then. You ask to be remembered, not every day, not in songs, but in small ways. A story told. A lesson repeated. A phrase you once said, spoken again without your name attached. That is enough. That is survival in memory. You used to make plans, trips, feasts, projects. Now your plans are simpler. Wash the shawl before frost. Bake bread before the flour runs out. Dry herbs for the ache in your back. These are small tasks, but they give shape to the day. They say, I am still part of this world. You do not resent those who rush. Who forget. Who speak quickly and leave. You remember being them. You remember thinking time was endless, that people were always just around the corner. You forgive their haste. You do not match it. You remain still. The walls of your home hold you now more than they ever did. You trace your fingers along them like an old friend's face. They have kept the wind away. They have held the heat. They have echoed your laughter and your weeping. You do not wish to leave them. You only wish they remember you when you are gone. Sometimes you sit and imagine what the world looks like beyond the next hill. You know you will not see it again. But that does not make it smaller. Your imagination is a window. You see the snow there, the river, the trees you once passed in spring. Your feet do not go, but your heart still does. You realize now that love can live quietly. Not in declarations or embraces, but in memory. In the way someone peels a root just like you did. In the way someone stops by, not to talk, but to sit. In the way your name lingers on someone's lips, even if they do not speak it. And at night, as the fire dies and the room grows still, you lie down and breathe. You do not feel lonely. You feel folded into something smaller, something gentler. The world has narrowed. But within that smallness, there is peace. There is clarity. There is space for only what matters. You begin to sense it, not as a warning, but as a slowing. The world feels softer. Edges blur. You forget what day it is, but not how the morning smells. You forget names, but not the shape of someone's kindness. Time folds around you like a thick wool blanket, warm, familiar, comforting. You are not rushing toward the end. You are walking gently toward it, as one might walk home. You rise slower each day. Not out of laziness, but out of reverence. Every movement feels like part of a farewell. You fold the cloth with more care. You sip the broth with deeper thanks. You hold your hands over the fire as if to remember what heat feels like in the bones. You are not in pain. You are in stillness. A kind of holy pause. The body releases its hold little by little. You eat less. You sleep more. Your legs refuse long journeys. Your voice no longer reaches the rafters. But you do not feel broken. You feel returned. Returned to something smaller, simpler. Something that asks only that you be. Not do. Just be. You sit more often now, near the hearth, by the window, with your face to the light. You watch the movement of the sky. You listen to birds you no longer name. The world is not dimming. It is deepening. Every sound feels rounder. Every shadow more sacred. It is as though life itself has leaned in, whispering its final truths. You no longer fear being forgotten. You understand now that forgetting is not the same as vanishing. You live in the way your daughter stirs the soup. In the way your grandson ties his shoes. In the way a neighbor still pauses when passing your door. These are your footprints, soft, quiet, but lasting. Visitors still come. Not in crowds, but in ones and twos. They do not speak loudly. They sit. They hold your hand. They offer stories you barely hear, and that is all right. Their presence is the offering. You smile, and that smile holds more love than words ever did. You speak to God often now, but not in fear. You think. You wonder. You remember. You do not ask for more time. You ask only that the last breaths come like your first, wrapped in care, guided by unseen hands, received with love. You believe they will. You sort through memories the way one sorts through old linens. Some are folded neatly. Others are worn thin from use. Some hold stains you no longer try to wash out. You bless them all. You do not try to rewrite your story. You accept it as it was, messy, strong, uneven, true. Your hands have grown lighter. Their grip is less firm, but they still remember how to comfort. They rest now more than they work. But even in rest they speak, of decades of service, of wounds tended, of loaves baked, of blessings given. They are not idle. They are full. You feel yourself loosening from the earth, gently. Like a fruit ready to fall. Not pulled, not torn, just ripe. Ready. You feel the weight shift in your chest, the air grows sweeter, the silence more alive. You are not leaving. You are being called. And you are not afraid to answer. You are visited in dreams by faces you had forgotten. They stand in fields you once walked, under skies that felt endless. They say nothing. But you understand. You wake with a smile. You whisper their names. You thank them for remembering you first. The things of this world matter more now, not less. A worn comb. a chipped bowl, a threadbare apron. You touch them like sacred relics. You do not cling. You honor. Each one tells a story. Each one says, I lived here. I loved here. I mattered. There is nothing dramatic about your final days. No thunder. No collapse. Only quiet. Warm broth. A fresh cloth on your forehead. The hush of a room holding its breath. You feel loved. You feel full. Not with food. With time. With memory. With presence. Those who care for you do not speak of endings. They speak of rest. Of comfort. Of light. And you smile, because you know. It is not an end. It is a return. A return to silence. To soil. To whatever came before breath and will come after it. You do not fight sleep anymore. When it comes, you go with it. You let it carry you. And each time you wake again, you are surprised. Grateful. You greet the world with the eyes of someone who has already said goodbye, and been gifted one more day. You no longer dream of the future. You dream only of what was, not to relive it, but to wrap it gently. To close it with care. You are sewing the final seam of your own story. Not rushed. Not frayed. Complete. The house knows. It breathes with you. The walls are quieter. The fire gentler. People speak in lower tones. Not out of fear, out of reverence. As though they, too, feel the veil thinning. As though they, too, are holding space for what comes next. And when the moment finally arrives, not a gasp, but a sigh, it will not feel like falling. It will feel like arriving. Like stepping out of one room and into another. A door opening. A breeze passing through. A name spoken, not aloud, but from somewhere beyond the walls. And in that moment you will return. Not to the earth, not to the sky, but to the memory of every hand you ever held. To every breath you ever gave. To every story you ever whispered. You will return to the thread from which you were woven. And that thread will continue, soft, strong, unseen, through every life you touched. And so, the old ones faded gently from the edge of the hearth. Not with noise, not with fanfare, but with stillness. With a cup set down carefully. With a shawl folded once more before sleep. They were not famous. They were not written in books. But they were the memory keepers. The quiet hands behind every meal, every story, every prayer. And though their names may be lost to time, the rhythm they left behind still echoes. In the way we light a candle. In the way we watch the fire. In the way we carry love in silence. Thank you for spending this time with me. Rest well tonight. You are part of the story now, too.